Welcome to my channel, Understand Your Mind. There is a very specific moment that almost all of us know. You feel something clearly inside you, a discomfort, a sadness, a soft but persistent anger, maybe even a need. And yet, you don't say it, not because you don't know how to put it into words, not because it isn't important, but because something inside you stops you just before you speak. That silence doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not random. It's a learned response. From a very early age, many of us learn that expressing what we feel can have consequences. Maybe when you were a child and you cried, someone told you it wasn't a big deal. Maybe when you got angry, they called you dramatic. Or when you said something hurt, you felt like you were being a burden. Little by little, the message gets internalized. Feeling is okay, but showing it is not always safe. This is how emotional silence is born, not as a conscious choice, but as a protection strategy. Over time, that silence becomes normal. You stop asking yourself whether you want to speak and start asking whether you should. You analyze the moment, the person, the context. You wonder if it's worth it, if it will be misunderstood, if it will cause problems. And many times you choose to stay silent, not because it's what you want, but because it seems like the most sensible option. The problem is that when silence becomes habitual, it starts to have an internal cost. Because what isn't said doesn't disappear. It stays inside. It accumulates. It turns into tension in the body, emotional fatigue, a vague feeling of not fully being yourself. You start adapting, softening what you feel, saying it's nothing when it is something, smiling when something hurts, continuing to function while something inside slowly fades. And the most confusing part is that, from the outside, you seem strong, calm, reasonable, even mature. But inside, a subtle disconnection keeps growing, the distance between what you feel and what you show. Many people confuse this silence with self-control or emotional maturity, but it isn't always that. Sometimes it's not self-control, but self-censorship. Not calm, but fear. Not balance, but habit. We stay silent because we don't want to create conflict. Because we don't want to disappoint. Because we don't want to be a burden. Because we fear that if we say what we feel, something will break. A relationship. An image. A fragile stability. And without realizing it, we begin living a reduced version of ourselves. Emotional silence also has another side, the difficulty of identifying what we feel. When we spend a long time not expressing ourselves, we stop listening to ourselves. Emotions become blurred. You know something isn't right, but you don't know exactly what. You feel uncomfortable, but you can't find the words. And the more time passes, the harder it becomes to speak, because you no longer know where to start. Here it's important to clarify something. This silence doesn't make you weak. On the contrary, it emerged because at some point you were sensitive in an environment that didn't know how to hold you. It was an intelligent way to survive emotionally. The problem isn't that it appeared. The problem is staying in it when it's no longer necessary. Because prolonged emotional silence doesn't protect, it isolates. You start feeling like no one really knows you, that your relationships are superficial, that a part of you is always left out, and that creates loneliness. Even when you're not alone. A silent loneliness. Hard to explain, because, in theory, everything is fine. This chapter isn't about pushing you to speak without limits. It's not about exposing yourself carelessly. It's about starting to look at your silence honestly. To ask yourself, without judgment, do I stay silent because I choose to, or because I'm afraid to say what I feel? That question is the first step, because only when you understand why you stay silent can you start deciding whether that silence still serves you. And there, very slowly, the real emotional work begins. When we try to understand why we don't say what we feel, we often stay on the surface. We think we stay silent because we don't want to argue, because it's not the right moment, because it's not worth it. But if we look a little deeper, we almost always find something more primitive, quieter, and more powerful. Fear. Not an obvious fear, but one disguised as logic. Many people say, I don't say it to avoid making things worse. I don't want to create tension. It's not that important. But beneath those phrases are unspoken questions. What if they don't understand me? What if they reject me? What if I disappoint them? What if I lose this bond? The fear behind silence is rarely the conflict itself. It's the risk to the relationship. From a young age, we learn that love, acceptance, and belonging are not always unconditional. Sometimes we feel more loved when we're easy, calm, adaptable, when we don't bother, when we don't ask for too much. And without realizing it, we associate expressing what we feel with the possibility of losing something valuable. This learning wasn't always explicit. No one may have said, if you speak, I'll stop loving you. But we felt it. In looks, in silences, in changes of attitude, in cold responses, in phrases like, don't exaggerate, you're always dramatic, it's not that big of a deal. And the body learns quickly. It learns that showing certain emotions has a cost, that saying what hurts can create distance, that making others uncomfortable can backfire. So a very human strategy appears. Better to stay silent than to risk. The problem is that this fear doesn't disappear with time. It transforms. In adulthood, you may no longer fear your parents withdrawing affection, but you fear your partner getting tired, your friends drifting away, being seen as problematic at work. The context changes, but the emotion is the same. If I say what I feel, I might lose something important. And here lies a painful paradox. You stay silent to preserve the bond, but by staying silent, you move away from yourself. And when you move too far away from yourself, the bonds you preserve stop feeling real. Another common fear is the fear of being an emotional burden. Many people don't speak because they feel what they're going through is too much, too intense, too sad, too complicated. They fear exhausting the other person. They fear being seen as weak or dependent. So they keep everything inside and appear self-sufficient on the outside and exhausted on the inside. There's also the fear of not knowing how to hold what opens up, because saying what you feel doesn't guarantee immediate relief. Sometimes it opens more questions, more emotions, more vulnerability, and if you never had a safe space to go through that, it makes sense that your nervous system prefers to avoid it. Silence feels more controllable. There's another fear that's rarely talked about. The fear that once you say what you feel, you'll have to do something about it. Because once you name a truth, you can't ignore it anymore. If you say, this hurts, you might have to set a boundary, make a decision, change something. And that's scary too. Silence, in that sense, is a way of postponing. But postponing isn't resolving, it's suspending. Meanwhile, the body keeps carrying what the mouth doesn't say. Unexpressed emotion shows up in other ways: irritability, fatigue, disconnection, diffuse anxiety. You don't know exactly what's wrong, but you know something isn't right. Here, it's important to understand something with compassion. This fear doesn't make you a coward. It makes you human. It's the result of having learned that emotional safety wasn't always guaranteed, of having had to choose between being authentic or being accepted. And many times, to survive, you chose acceptance. Emotional work doesn't begin by forcing yourself to speak. It begins by recognizing this fear without judgment, by telling yourself, "It makes sense that this is hard for me," because only when fear feels seen does it begin to soften. This chapter doesn't aim to push you to say everything. It aims to help you understand what you're really afraid of losing when you stay silent. Because when you name it, you regain something essential: the ability to choose consciously. And that choice is the first step toward a healthier vulnerability. There is a deep reason why vulnerability feels so uncomfortable. It's not just mental, it's physical. When you show yourself as you are, with your doubts, your real emotions, your limits, the body reacts as if it's in danger. Your heart rate increases. Tension appears. Sometimes you even feel the urge to pull back, to minimize what you just said, or to turn it into a joke. What you feel isn't weakness, it's exposure. Being vulnerable means allowing others to see you without defenses. And that activates a silent but powerful question: what will they do with what they see? Once someone sees a sensitive part of you, you can't control how they interpret it. You can't be sure they'll take care of it. And that loss of control is deeply uncomfortable. That's why many people aren't so afraid of speaking. They're afraid of being truly seen. Being seen carries the risk of not being liked, of not fitting in, of not being approved of being judged by people who don't understand your story. Vulnerability doesn't hurt because it's wrong. It hurts because it puts us in a position of total openness, and opening up always carries the possibility of being hurt. It's important to dismantle a common belief that vulnerability should feel liberating right away. It doesn't. At first, vulnerability feels uncomfortable, tense, unsafe. And many people interpret that discomfort as a sign that they're doing something wrong. But they're not. The discomfort is a sign that you're leaving an old pattern, breaking an automatic way of protecting yourself, allowing yourself to be seen beyond the controlled version you usually show. That's why the body resists. When you've spent a long time hiding what you feel, showing it doesn't feel natural. It feels strange, even dangerous. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It means you're crossing an internal boundary you didn't cross before. Many people confuse vulnerability with indiscriminate exposure. They think being vulnerable means telling everything to everyone without filters. And when that ends badly, they conclude that opening up was a mistake. But the problem wasn't vulnerability. It was the lack of care. Vulnerability isn't emotional nakedness in front of just anyone. It's honest presence with discernment. Being vulnerable doesn't mean handing over your inner world without protection. It means allowing yourself to be seen in a space where respect, listening, and containment exist. When that's missing, vulnerability turns into a wound, and the body learns quickly, better not do this again. That's why many people close off after a bad experience, not because they don't want to connect, but because their nervous system associates openness with pain. Accepting the discomfort of vulnerability means understanding this. Discomfort is not the enemy. The enemy is forcing yourself to open up without safety. When you choose the right moment and the right person, the discomfort is still there. But it doesn't destroy you. It passes through you. And then it transforms into something else. Relief, connection, authenticity. There's another aspect of being seen that also scares us. Once someone sees what you feel, you can't keep pretending with yourself. Saying an emotional truth out loud makes it real. And sometimes we're not ready to face what that implies, because being seen also means responsibility. Responsibility toward yourself, toward your limits, toward your needs. Vulnerability doesn't just expose you to others. It exposes you to yourself. That's why many people choose silence. Because silence allows you to keep functioning without changing anything, without disturbing the environment, without disturbing yourself. But that silence has a price. Living from an incomplete version of yourself. Accepting the discomfort of being seen doesn't mean jumping into the void. It means recognizing that emotional growth involves uncomfortable moments. Not because something is wrong, but because you're expanding your capacity to be with yourself and with others in a more real way. Well-chosen vulnerability doesn't weaken you. It grounds you. It reminds you that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy, that you don't have to have everything figured out to be accepted, that you don't have to be clear about everything to deserve to be heard. This chapter is an invitation to stop running from that initial discomfort, to see it as a sign of transition, not danger. Because on the other side of that discomfort, there is no loss, there is depth. After understanding silence and fear, and accepting the discomfort of being seen, an essential question appears. Who can I truly open up to? And this is where many people get confused. For a long time, we've been told that being vulnerable means saying what we feel without filters. That opening up is the same as absolute honesty. But emotional psychology shows us something more nuanced. Not all openness is healthy, and not everyone is a safe space. Choosing how and with whom to open up is a form of self-care. Conscious vulnerability isn't impulsive. It doesn't come from the urgency to relieve pain, but from the clarity to protect yourself. It involves observing the environment, the relationship, and the person before sharing something sensitive. It means asking yourself, does this person know how to listen without judging? Do they respect my timing? Can they hold complex emotions without minimizing or fixing? Because listening isn't just hearing. Listening is holding. Many people confuse closeness with emotional safety. Someone can be close to you, share time with you, even affection, and still not be a safe space for your vulnerability. There are people who, when you open up, try to fix you, or give quick advice, or compare you to other stories, or make you feel exaggerated, not always out of malice, but out of emotional limitation. And that matters. This is where emotional boundaries come in. A boundary isn't a wall. It's an inner guide that tells you where it's safe to place something valuable, and your deepest emotions are valuable. Setting emotional boundaries doesn't mean closing yourself off. It means choosing. Choosing not to tell everything at the first encounter. Choosing not to explain your most recent wound to someone who barely knows you. Choosing not to expose a fragile part of yourself when the other person isn't emotionally available. This isn't coldness. It's emotional intelligence. It's also important to distinguish vulnerability from venting. When something hurts deeply, the natural impulse is to speak quickly to anyone to release pressure. Sometimes that works, but other times it leaves a strange feeling. You opened up and now feel more exposed, not lighter. That usually happens when you share from urgency, not from choice. Conscious vulnerability takes its time, not because it represses, but because it listens. It observes the emotion, names it internally, and decides whether this is the right place and the right person. Sometimes the answer is yes. Other times it's no. And both answers are valid. Some people need to feel trust before opening up. Others need to open up to feel trust. Neither is wrong. But even those who open easily need to learn to filter. A good indicator of emotional safety is how someone responds to small openings. You don't have to share the deepest parts right away. You can start with something light and observe. Do they listen? Do they respect you? Do they not rush you? Do they not invalidate you? Vulnerability is built in layers. And here's something very important. You don't owe your full truth to anyone. Not to your friends. Not to your family. Not to your partner. Sharing is a choice, not an obligation. Your story, your processes, and your emotions belong to you. Sometimes the safest person to open up to is yourself. Writing. Reflecting. Naming what you feel without having to explain it to anyone. That is vulnerability too. And often it's the first step toward sharing later from a more grounded place. Conscious vulnerability doesn't seek constant validation. It seeks inner coherence. It seeks peace with what you share, not regret afterward. When you choose well how and with whom to open up, something shifts. The discomfort remains, but it doesn't break you. You feel held, respected, heard, and that strengthens you, not weakens you. This chapter doesn't invite you to close yourself off more. It invites you to refine your openness, to move from speaking impulsively to speaking intentionally, to understand that caring for your emotional world is just as important as expressing it, because vulnerability, when conscious, stops being a risk and becomes a route. After traveling through silence, fear, discomfort, and conscious choice, we reach a key point. Understanding that not all silence is avoidance, and not all speech is courage. Emotional maturity appears when we stop living at the extremes and learn to inhabit nuance. For a long time, silence may have been an escape, a way to not feel, not disturb, not risk, but silence can transform. It can stop being a defensive refuge and become a space of clarity. The difference isn't in what you do, staying silent or speaking, but from where you do it. Silence from fear contracts. Silence from awareness protects. Speaking from urgency exposes. Speaking from clarity integrates. Integrating silence and speech means listening to what's happening inside before deciding what to do with it. It means giving yourself permission not to react immediately, not to explain yourself right away, not to respond to external pressure demanding constant transparency. We live in a culture that values immediate expression. Say what you feel now. Tell it all. Share it right away. But emotional processing isn't always instant. Many emotions need time to organize, to settle, to reveal their true root. And when we speak before understanding them, we don't communicate truth. We communicate noise. This is where silence stops being escape and becomes incubation. To incubate an emotion is to allow it to exist without translating it immediately, to feel without rushing to explain, to let the body regulate before putting words to it. That silence doesn't deny what you feel. It honors it. There are moments when staying silent is a form of self-respect, because you don't yet know what you need, because you're still understanding, because you're still healing. And there is nothing wrong with that. The problem appears when silence becomes permanent, when it's no longer a pause, but a pattern. When you stay silent, even when you know what you feel. When fear continues to decide for you. Integration means being able to choose, to speak when you need to, and to stay silent when it protects you. This integration also means accepting that you won't always be understood, and that doesn't invalidate your experience. Speaking from a more conscious place reduces the need to convince. You're no longer seeking approval. You're seeking inner coherence. When you speak from there, your words are simpler but firmer. You justify less. You over-explain less. You don't apologize for feeling. And if the other person can't accompany you, you notice it sooner, without collapsing. Integrated silence doesn't erase you. It holds you. There is deep freedom in not having to tell everything, in not having to update everyone on your process, in allowing yourself to change without explanations, in letting some things be only yours while they take shape. That freedom isn't isolation, it's emotional autonomy. There is also power in speaking less and saying more. In choosing words that come from clarity, not urgency. In speaking when you're no longer overwhelmed. When you no longer need defense. When what you say doesn't seek immediate relief, but truth. That kind of speech weighs less, but reaches further. Throughout this journey, we've seen that vulnerability isn't a single act, but a process, that it requires time, choice, and care, that it's not about opening or closing, but about inhabiting yourself. When you learn to integrate silence and speech, something inside settles. You no longer betray yourself by silencing what matters, nor expose yourself by speaking without support. You begin to trust your own emotional rhythm, and from there, your relationship with yourself changes. You stop pressuring yourself to be brave all the time. You stop punishing yourself for needing protection. You understand that both movements, speaking and staying silent, can be healthy when they come from respect for yourself. Not everyone deserves access to your full story. Staying silent isn't disappearing. It's choosing yourself. Speaking less, but from a more conscious, safer, more authentic place. And when you speak from there, your words weigh less, but they mean much more. If this process has resonated with you, keep this in mind. You're not broken for staying silent, and you're not weak for fearing openness. You're learning. And learning to care for yourself emotionally is also a form of courage. When you're ready to speak, you'll know. And when you need silence, you'll know that too. Both can coexist. And right there, exactly there, a more honest way of being in the world begins. If this video has resonated with you, if something I've shared has touched a nerve in you, I need to ask you something. Subscribe to the channel. Not because I need numbers, but because you might need these reminders in your day-to-day life. And if you share this video, it can help more people who are going through something similar. I'd love to read you in the comments and know whether this content has helped you. I'm here in this space to remind you that you're not alone on this path. I'll see you in the next video.